second. But a matrix is basically just going to be numbers. There's no variables involved that are in what they call a rectangular array. And that rectangular array is arranged in rows and columns. So I'm just going to kind of put a little bit. The rows will go down the side and the columns will go across the top. And that will change depending on what kind of a system you're working with. Okay, so I'm just going to show you guys how to input this in your calculator to do what they call reduced row echelon form. If you were doing this by hand, this takes a little bit of practice, but we're just going to have the calculator do this for us. There's other ways you can put this into the calculator, but this is honestly the fastest way you could get an answer to a system. So how do I translate the system into a matrix? So you have to make sure your variables go in the same order. These are just like x, y, and then equal a number, x, y equal to a number. As long as the variables are in a consistent order, you can just write down the coefficients. So that's what I'm going to do. So across the top row, I'm going to write 7, 15, and then 347. So just the coefficient on x, the coefficient on y, and then whatever it's equal to. And then the second row would be -2, -30, -742. Now, I'm going to write this on my paper just so you guys can see this. If you were doing this by hand, we would either have just like a vertical line, or sometimes I'm just going to put a little dotted line. You won't see this on the calculator, but if you were working on this by hand, it would look like that, and you would work around with it until you could get what's on the left side of that little dotted line to be what we call the identity matrix. You're not going to do that, but I'm going to show you what it looks like in the calculator here in a second. So this is a 2x2 system. This matrix, when you type it into the calculator, has 2 rows and 3 columns. And it's important to know those dimensions because you have to type that into the calculator so it gives you the correct number of spots to put those numbers in. So it's 2 rows by 3 columns. The rows go first, the columns go second when you put that information into the calculator. Okay, this system, 3 variables, 3 equations, and as long as they go in the correct order, like x, y, z, x, y, z, x, y, z for all of them, then you go ahead and just write down the coefficients. So it would be 3, 2, -5, and then the 90. I got 18. Negative y, what would y be if it just says negative y? -1, exactly. -1, 30, and then that -5, 64. And then on the bottom, I got 15, 7, 12, and -291. Okay, now again, I'm just going to do this because in real life, if you guys were actually solving this, you would separate what we call the coefficients from the actual constants that the equations are equal to. But it's not going to, you're not going to see that little dotted line in the calculator. This one you can see is larger. What would you tell me the dimensions on this second matrix we wrote down? Austin, what do you think? 3 by 4, good. Because you got 3 rows, 4 columns. And then I just have one more little example that I'm going to actually show you how to use the calculator to solve these. This last one's weird. So if you don't have all the variables, you still have to represent all the variables in a matrix if you're going to use the matrix to solve the system. So this has 3 equations, 3 different variables. The top row has x, y, and z. So I'm just going to write that down just like we've been doing. Can anybody look at that second equation and tell me what that row would look like in the matrix? Because it's missing some variables. So how would I write that? Because you have to represent each one. Frank, what do you think? Exactly. So I know x, so you just put a 0. You have no term with a y, so you just put a 0 in that position, and then the -4. All right, very similar underneath. You have an x, it's 6. You have a number in front of y, it's -3. I don't have a term with a z, so you just put a 0. And that's really important if you want to use the calculator. If you're missing a variable, totally fine, but you've got to actually represent it in the matrix with a 0 if it's missing. And then that one was actually equal to 0. This is still the same dimensions as what we did above. A 3 variable, 3 equations are going to be 3 by 4 in the lovely calculator. All right, so now I'm going to show you how to do this. And I'm just going to use the first example to show you a 2 by 2. Okay, So on your calculator, I'm going to write these directions out. So you're going to hit second, and then the button you're looking for, it looks like an x to the -1 power. It's like the 5th button down on this left side. So just hit second, and then you'll see the second function on that says matrix above that button. Okay, now this can be tricky because 2 of these menus almost look identical, and you might have something in here, you might not. You can literally put a matrix for each one of those letters. You can put multiple different matrices in here. I'm just going to use matrix A for my example here, but what you want to do from this screen, across the top you have to input the matrix. So just use the right arrow key, and you want to go over to the menu that says edit. It'll look almost identical to that names menu, but we have to actually put the matrix in before we can do it. Okay, now once you're there, you can pick whichever matrix. I'm just going to use matrix A, so it's already highlighted, so you can just hit enter and it'll take you to a screen. Then you have to type in the dimensions. So if I look at that very first example, that was a 2 by 3. If you want to hit enter, that'll take you to the next, or you can use the arrow key to move between those. And then it should set you up a matrix that'll be those exact dimensions. Now, as you type in the data, so I'm just going to say type in, technically they're called elements if you're interested, each one of those numbers, you're just going to type them in. It'll go across the row as you go. So after each one, it's just kind of like doing linear regression. You have to hit enter. So like if I do 7, it'll put it in the first spot. 15, then you just hit enter in between each one, 347. After it does the first row, it'll automatically take you to the second row. If you have a negative value, make sure you use the negative key under the 3. Don't use the subtraction sign. The calculator doesn't like that. And actually have negative numbers, whoops, for each of the values in that second row. So you're going to type in your data. Okay. Now this is an important step and a lot of people will forget it. So you do not want to be in this screen when you start to try to solve the system. So you're just going to hit second and the button right next to it, which says quit as the second mode, and it'll just take you back to the main screen. So it's just the quit. You want to be on this screen if you want to go about trying to solve the matrix, or solve the system using the matrix, excuse me. Now, you're actually going to do that second x to the -1 again, but it has to come from the main screen when you do this, otherwise it'll kind of put it in the wrong part of the calculator. So from this, I'm just on the main home screen, second, and then that matrix button. And then on this step, I want to arrow over to the menu that says math, because we're going to have the calculator solve this for us. And this is way down the menu. If you have an 83, it might be a little different spot than the 84, but you're looking for this to say, it says RREF and then a little parenthesis. That stands for reduced row echelon form. If you were doing this by hand, this process is really similar to kind of using elimination. You just do not use you don't use the variables, you just use the coefficients, but we're going to have the calculator do it for us. So it's all the way down here. On mine it starts at letter B. Yours might be, if you have an 83, it might be a little bit higher than that. But then all you have to do once you get to that, just scroll down to that and then hit enter, and it should take that back to the main screen, which is where you want to do, or where you want to be. And then I want to do the reduced row echelon form to get my answer for the matrix that we input. So I know this is annoying, but there's one more step. Okay, you're going to do that second and then x to the -1 again to get back into that matrix menu. And this time you just want to select the matrix. So you can use that names menu. We don't have to arrow over here. I used matrix A, and so that already is highlighted next to it. So just from this screen, I would hit enter, and then you'll hit enter again after it takes it back to the main screen. And so let me just kind of explain to you what that display shows. And I know we are not doing this whole process, but let me just show you guys this. If you were doing this by hand, what I have on the left, these four, the 1s and 0s, this is called the identity matrix. That's this part. And then the two numbers to the side in that third column, those are actually going to be your solutions. So the top number is your x value, and the bottom number would be your y value for the solution to that system. Now, by the time I type that all in all honesty, that would probably be faster for me to just solve that by hand. But if you do have a larger matrix, this can make that process go faster. A lot of you guys saw that on the quiz we took the other day, that it takes a little bit of time, obviously. So the bigger the matrix, maybe the more useful this would be. So let me have you guys, I'll just try the second one just to run through this one more time. So you can see the display will be a little bit different because it's a bigger matrix. So if I want to go back and input different data, just that second matrix, and arrow over to the edit, and just go ahead and hit enter. And I'm going to change this, that second example, let me pull it down just a little bit so you guys can see the whole thing on the screen there. That one is 3 by 4 with those constants in there. So just 3, enter, 4, enter. It'll give you another column. And then again, it'll just go across the row, and then it'll automatically go to the next. So if I'm reading that, like 3, enter, 2, enter, -5, enter, 90, enter. And you can just go ahead and go straight across the row. I'm just doing that second example. And maybe just take a second and make sure you didn't type anything in there incorrectly. And don't forget, don't use the minus sign, use the negative key. Once you have the matrix in there, you don't want to do anything else in this screen, so just hit second and the button next to it. The second function is to quit. So it's second mode, but it goes back to the main screen. Alright, and I'm just going to run through this real quick. You want to be on the main screen when you start this. So second, and then that matrix button, x to the -1. Go over to math. And we want to do reduced row echelon. So it's kind of far down the list. It's at letter B on mine. It might be a little higher if you have an 83. You just arrow down to that, hit enter. Should take you back to the main screen. You got to get back into that matrix menu. So second, x to the -1. And you just want to select the matrix. I used matrix A again. You could change it up and use a different one, but just from that screen, should just hit enter twice. And I know right now I must have typed something wrong because those are supposed to be nice numbers. So I'm going to go back into my edit thing and see what I see it right now. -5, not -4. Alright, forgive. And you guys probably have the right answer, but I'm going to do this real quick. There we go. Alright, now let me write this. You guys will see if this is a little bit bigger. You see these 1s and 0s. This is called the identity matrix. You guys don't need to know this right now for our class, but just to show you this, if you have a larger, this was a 3 system with 3 variables. This would be a 3 by 3, what they call identity matrix. It's just 1s and 0s. You don't see the line here, but you see these values. And the way that we type this in, the top number should be whatever variable came first in your equation. So the 3 would be the x, the -12 would be the y, and the -21 would be the z. So that's how that works. And if you want to use this, you have to solve all these by hand tomorrow, but if you want to use this to check, you definitely can. And I'll leave these lovely directions up here on the board, or I'll write them up on the board for you because I know that's a lot of steps. Is anybody having a question? Okay, I'm going to stop talking then.